What would you do if the person you trusted most became the cruelest one in your life? That question echoed in my mind as Kevin approached, his eyes bloodshot with rage. You think you can talk back to me, Sarah? He hissed, and before I could even react, his fists slammed into my stomach. The pain surged, not just making it hard to breathe, but shaking every belief I once held. I froze, my breath caught in my throat as Kevin's fists clenched, his eyes burning with rage. You think you can talk back to me, Sarah? He hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Before I could even react, he lunged toward me, his face twisted in fury. In a flash, he raised both fists and slammed them into my stomach. The shockwave of pain tore through my already broken body, leaving me gasping for air. I clutched my sides, struggling to breathe, feeling helpless, trapped in a hospital bed that now felt like a prison. The metallic taste of fear filled my mouth as the sound of footsteps approached the door, but even that small noise felt distant, like it came from a different world. Was this the moment it all fell apart? Was this where I lost everything? My name is Sarah. I'm 43 years old, a housewife, and the mother of a 7-year-old daughter named Emma. From the outside, my life might seem perfect. Married to Kevin, a man who once promised me love and happiness, but appearances can be deceiving. When Kevin and I first met, he seemed to be everything I thought I wanted. He was confident, attentive, and effortlessly charming. He swept me off my feet with a smile that made my heart race. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party, and from the moment our eyes locked, something shifted inside me. I thought I had found my happily ever after. Kevin seemed perfect, always knowing the right things to say, the right gestures to make. Within a year, I was wearing his ring and planning a future that I believed would be filled with love and fulfillment. I left my steady job at an accounting firm to embrace the life Kevin envisioned for us, a traditional household where I would support his career and focus on our family. At first, it felt like the right decision. Kevin showered me with affection, surprising me with flowers and planning romantic evenings. His promises of a bright future made every sacrifice seem worthwhile. But once the honeymoon phase ended, the man I had married started to disappear. The warm, loving Kevin became distant and cold. Compliments turned into criticisms, and his thoughtful gestures vanished. Instead of asking how my day had gone, he started pointing out everything I hadn't done to his satisfaction. The spotless home and freshly cooked meals that once brought me joy became expectations, and anything less than perfection was met with his disapproval. Whenever I tried to express my feelings, Kevin would dismiss me with a smirk. "You're a housewife, Sarah," he'd say, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's not like you have a hard life." Those words cut deeper than I wanted to admit, but I swallowed my pain, convincing myself that I had to stay strong for Emma. She deserved a stable home, even if that meant enduring Kevin's growing indifference. Over time, I realized that the man I had fallen in love with had vanished completely. Kevin became a stranger, someone who no longer saw me as a partner, but as an object to command and criticize. What I once believed was a dream had transformed into a nightmare. Still, I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would change. Kevin's constant criticism became the soundtrack of my days, a dark cloud hanging over everything. No matter how much effort I put into keeping the house spotless or making sure dinner was on the table when he came home, it was never enough. "You missed a spot on the counter," he would mutter as he dropped his bag carelessly on the table. "Why isn't Emma ready for bed yet? What do you even do all day?" His words were like tiny, invisible cuts, slowly eroding my confidence, each one adding to the growing pile of self-doubt that I carried around like a heavy weight. At first, I tried to reason with him, explaining how much effort I put into managing everything, but my words always fell on deaf ears. "You're just making excuses, Sarah," he'd reply. "You have one job, to take care of this house and our family. Why is that so hard?" Kevin's frequent job changes only made things worse. Each time he came home with news of being let go or quitting, he would blame everyone but himself. His bosses were unfair, his co-workers incompetent, And yet somehow he managed to twist these failures into reasons why I was the one letting him down. "You're supposed to make things easier for me," he'd say. "Instead, you're just another problem I have to deal with." I often felt like I was raising two children, Emma and Kevin. While I did everything to make Emma's childhood happy and safe, Kevin's unpredictable moods made it a constant challenge. He would criticize her too, scolding her for minor things like leaving toys on the floor or talking too loudly. I found myself stepping in, trying to shield her from his harshness. "Don't take that tone with her," I'd say firmly, only for him to turn his anger on me. "Maybe if you taught her some discipline, I wouldn't have to," he'd snap back. As the years passed, I stopped trying to argue. It was exhausting, and I knew it would only escalate. Instead, I focused on Emma, pouring all my energy into giving her a sense of stability and love, even as my own spirit withered. Kevin, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on control. The man I had once admired had become someone I barely recognized, a man whose words and actions left me feeling small and invisible. And yet, I stayed, for Emma. I told myself for the hope that one day things might get better. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had just finished grocery shopping. My mind was preoccupied with the long list of tasks waiting for me at home. Preparing dinner, checking Emma's homework, and tidying up the kitchen. As I crossed the street with bags in hand, I never saw the car coming. The screech of tires and the blaring of the horn were the last things I heard before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, my body aching and immobilized. Both of my legs were in casts, and every breath sent sharp pain through my ribs. A nurse stood beside me, explaining that I had been hit by a speeding car. My injuries were severe, and my recovery would take months. In those first few days, I felt utterly helpless. Tasks I had taken for granted, sitting up, eating, even reaching for a glass of water, were impossible without assistance. My parents, Susan and Michael, became my lifeline, visiting me daily and taking care of Emma while I was confined to the hospital. They brought me meals, reassured me that Emma was doing fine, and tried to lift my spirits with their constant support. But Kevin was nowhere to be seen. I had expected him to rush to my side the moment he heard about the accident, but instead, there was only silence. The days bled into weeks, each one longer and heavier than the last, and still, he didn't come. Every time the door to my hospital room opened, I held my breath, hoping it would be him, but it never was. When the third week finally arrived, Kevin walked in, but his expression wasn't one of concern or guilt. It was annoyance and irritable, almost disgusted expression. He stood at the foot of my bed, arms crossed, as though I were the inconvenience, and without a trace of empathy, he spoke his first words since the accident. "Do you have any idea how much of a burden you've become?" His words landed with more force than the impact of the car that had shattered my body, knocking the wind from me, leaving me stunned in the sterile white bed. How could he say that? How could someone I had given so much to, someone I thought loved me, treat me with such cruelty? I stared at him, unable to comprehend the venom in his voice. "What do you mean?" I managed, my voice breaking with the weight of my confusion and hurt. Kevin repeated the words, his voice colder this time, sharper. "Do you have any idea how much of a burden you've become?" My broken body protested as I tried to sit up, but the pain was overwhelming. I looked at him in disbelief, the disbelief soon turning to anger and grief. "I didn't ask for this, Kevin. I didn't choose to be hit by a car." He scoffed and moved closer, looming over me as if I were a failure to be judged, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "You think that makes a difference?" His tone dripped with disdain. "You're lying here doing nothing. Now I have to handle everything. I can't afford this, Sarah. You need to figure it out." Tears welled up in my eyes as his words sliced through me. "Figure it out?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I can't even walk, Kevin. What do you expect me to do?" He glared at me, his expression hardening. "Sell your jewelry," he snapped. "You've got more than enough to cover this mess. I'm not wasting another dime on you." The shock of his cruelty rendered me speechless. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process the full weight of what he was saying. "You're serious?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? You're my husband, Kevin. You're supposed to support me." "Support you?" he barked, his voice rising in anger. "You're useless now, Sarah. I'm carrying this family on my back and you can't even do your part anymore." I felt the air in the room thicken, suffocating me as his fury turned into something more primal, more dangerous. His words seemed to be choking me, and for the first time, the reality of his contempt hit me like a truck. I couldn't stay silent anymore. "I've done nothing but support you, Kevin," I yelled, my voice hoarse from the effort. "I gave up my career for you. I raised our daughter. I kept our home running while you bounced from one job to another, and now, when I need you most, you call me useless?" His face twisted, and the rage on it was something I didn't recognize. "You think you can talk back to me?" he shouted, his fists slamming down on the edge of the bed, shaking the entire frame. "You don't get to make demands." I flinched at the violence in his words, but before I could even process it, he lunged forward, fists clenched tightly. His anger erupted with brutal force as he struck me in the stomach with both hands. Pain shot through my already broken body, and I gasped, struggling for breath as the room spun around me. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but the emotional devastation cut deeper than any physical pain. I stared at him, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. How had the man I loved, the man who had once promised to cherish me, become this person? How had he become a monster so consumed with his own needs that he could justify hurting me, even now? My mind screamed for clarity, but there was only the overwhelming, crushing pain, both physical and emotional. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I was trapped, both by the hospital bed and by the reality of this twisted version of the man I thought I knew. "What are you—" The pain from Kevin's attack radiated through my body, leaving me gasping and clutching my stomach. Before I could fully process what had happened, the door to my hospital room burst open. A nurse and a security guard rushed in, their faces a mixture of shock and determination. "What's going on here?" the nurse demanded, stepping between me and Kevin. "She provoked me," Kevin shouted defensively, his fists still clenched. "She's ruining my life." The security guard didn't hesitate. "Sir, step back now," he ordered, grabbing Kevin by the arm. Kevin resisted, but the guard tightened his grip. "You need to leave immediately." Kevin turned to me one last time, his face pale with fury. "You'll regret this, Sarah," he hissed. "This isn't over." As the guard escorted him out, I felt a mixture of fear and relief. My body ached, my heart was shattered, but for the first time I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer. Kevin's cruelty had reached a point of no return. The nurse leaned over me, checking my injuries. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded weakly. "Please just keep him away from me," I whispered. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. My parents, Susan and Michael, stepped in completely, ensuring I was never alone. They handled every detail, from caring for Emma to speaking with the hospital administration about filing a formal report against Kevin. Their unwavering support became my anchor in the storm. Physically, I was healing, but the emotional scars ran deeper. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kevin standing over me, his fists raised in rage. The memory of his attack replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. Despite the pain, I knew I had to take action, not just for myself, but for Emma. I began speaking with a lawyer, Amanda, who assured me that Kevin would be held accountable for his actions. "You've been through enough, Sarah," she said firmly. "It's time to fight back." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to take control of my life. The decision to fight back wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Kevin's violent outburst in the hospital had solidified what I already knew. I couldn't let him continue to control or harm me. For Emma's sake and my own, I had to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. With the support of my parents, I began gathering everything I needed for my case. Amanda, my lawyer, was a sharp and determined woman who quickly became my strongest ally. During our first meeting, she listened intently as I recounted years of Kevin's emotional abuse and the physical attack in the hospital. "You have a strong case, Sarah," Amanda assured me. "Between the hospital staff's testimonies and the medical records documenting your injuries, we can prove his actions beyond any doubt." Hearing those words gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I worked with Amanda to collect evidence, from the nurse's statements to photos of my bruises taken immediately after the incident. My parents also helped compile documentation showing Kevin's neglect and his history of financial irresponsibility. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture of a man who had spent years tearing me down. The legal process was grueling, but I refused to back down. Kevin, on the other hand, tried to intimidate me from the sidelines. He left voicemails alternating between empty apologies and thinly veiled threats. "You're ruining my life," he said in one. "If you think you can win, you're wrong." I didn't respond to any of his calls. Amanda advised me to remain silent and let the evidence speak for itself. "Don't give him the satisfaction of a reaction," she said. As the court date approached, I threw myself into my recovery. Physical therapy was excruciating, but each small victory, standing up for the first time, taking a single step, reminded me of my strength. Emma's bright laughter and my parents' unwavering support kept me going, even on the hardest days. I wasn't just preparing for a legal battle. I was reclaiming my life. For years, Kevin had stripped me of my confidence and independence. Now, I was determined to show him and myself that I was stronger than he ever imagined. The day of the hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and determination. Dressed in a simple yet confident outfit, I walked into the courtroom with Amanda by my side. My parents sat in the gallery, their reassuring smiles a constant source of strength. Emma, too young to understand the situation, stayed at home with a trusted babysitter. Kevin was already seated at the defense table, his once confident demeanor replaced by visible unease. His lawyer whispered hardly in his ear, but his eyes kept darting toward me. The man who had always tried to dominate me now looked like a shadow of himself. Amanda began the case with a clear and precise recounting of Kevin's actions, starting with the assault in the hospital. The nurse and security guard testified, detailing the moment they intervened during Kevin's violent outburst. Their statements were compelling, painting a vivid picture of the attack. Next, Amanda presented the medical records, which documented not only the injuries from the accident, but also the additional bruising caused by Kevin's punches. Photos of my injuries were displayed in the courtroom, and as I sat there, I could feel the weight of the evidence settle in, each image a painful reminder of the abuse I had suffered. Kevin's lawyer attempted to downplay the incident, calling it a moment of frustration, a one-off, and arguing that Kevin had already apologized, but Amanda wasn't having any of it. She stood firm, her presence unwavering, as she methodically dismantled every excuse. "This isn't just about one incident," Amanda's voice rang through the room. "This is the culmination of years of cruelty, manipulation, and violence. Sarah has endured enough, and it's time for her to receive justice." Her words hit home harder than I expected. Finally, someone understood. The weight of everything I had endured over the years, those subtle moments of emotional neglect, the cruel remarks, the occasional violence was being acknowledged, and it felt like a light breaking through the clouds. When Kevin took the stand, his attempts to shift blame were weak and unconvincing. "She's exaggerating," he stammered, his voice trembling slightly. "I've done everything for this family, and she's the one trying to ruin me." The smug arrogance he had always carried was slipping away piece by piece. Amanda's cross-examination was relentless. She forced Kevin to admit his failures as a husband, a father, and a human being. She brought up every instance where he had neglected his responsibilities, exposing him for the coward he was. By the time she finished, he was visibly shaken, his bravado evaporating. His defenses had crumbled entirely. Hours of testimony passed before the judge finally delivered the verdict. Kevin was found guilty of assault and domestic abuse. The gavel struck, echoing in my ears, and with it came a wave of relief that I didn't know I'd been holding back. Kevin's conviction marked the end of a chapter, and though it couldn't undo the years of pain, it was justice, and I had earned it. Walking out of the courthouse with my parents by my side, their steady support a lifeline, I realized just how far I had come. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the constant fear, from the weight of Kevin's control, and from the relentless judgment of a marriage built on lies. In the weeks following the verdict, I found a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't large, but it was everything I needed to start anew. Each piece of furniture, every decoration, felt like a small victory. Our new space wasn't just walls and rooms, it was a symbol of everything I had fought for. Emma's laughter filled the apartment, and for the first time, the sound was one of hope, not fear. Determined to create a future for her, I decided to do something I had never thought possible: share my story. One evening, as Emma and I sat watching videos together, it hit me. I could help others who might be struggling like I once had. With my parents' encouragement, I started a YouTube channel. I shared my journey surviving an abusive marriage, fighting for justice, and rebuilding a life from the ground up. I spoke about the resilience it took to heal, the importance of self-care, and how even the smallest victories were worth celebrating. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. Viewers began reaching out, sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking out. The comments flooded in, each one a reminder that I was no longer alone. Brands contacted me, offering collaborations, and the income from my channel grew beyond my expectations. For the first time in years, I felt financially independent. The success of the channel allowed me to not only secure Emma's future, but also fulfill dreams I had long put on hold. I started saving for her education and planning trips for us, making memories that I hoped would stay with her forever. The apartment that had once felt like a temporary stop became our home, a place of love and laughter. Every night, as Emma and I cooked dinner together or curled up on the couch to watch her favorite shows, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was no longer the woman Kevin had tried to break. I was stronger, wiser, and happier. With Emma by my side, I knew our future was bright. But can a legal victory truly heal the deep wounds I've endured? Can I really escape the shadows of the past and rebuild a life for myself and Emma? As I walked into the courtroom, anxiety surged, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't allow Kevin and everything he had done to continue destroying my life. Despite the haunting past, today I was no longer the weak woman I once was. Everything I was doing now wasn't just for me. It was for Emma, for our future. And I wouldn't let anyone, not even Kevin, take that from me again. Do you think Kevin truly deserves this punishment? If you were in my shoes, what would you do in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay updated with more stories to come, and join us in building a strong, resilient community. Thank you for always being a part of this journey.
Maggie, right? Nice to meet you. Your pa, oh no, dressed modestly, don't you? Mom? Did you almost call her poor just now? That's terrible, saying such a true thing. That's why I didn't say it. I stopped myself just in time, so you should too. While smirking, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law were chatting. It was their first meeting face to face. And I felt incredibly uncomfortable with their attitudes. But since they were James's family, I tried to convince myself they couldn't be bad people. The father-in-law, a famous company president I had even seen on TV, was there too. His presence was intimidating. He didn't side with anyone, merely observing. Which was somehow frightening since I couldn't tell what he was thinking. I'm Maggie, 26 years old. James and I have decided to marry. And I am currently meeting his family. My parents have passed away. So we recently visited their graves together. My father died of illness when I was young. And my mother, who raised me alone, passed away last year after falling ill suddenly. Now with no family left, I thought I had to live on my own. But James was always by my side. Without saying much or rushing anything. His quiet presence was calming. When my mother realized she was sick, she worried I would be trapped by memories and began discarding her belongings. Ultimately, only the wedding dress she wore at her marriage to my father was left. Whether intentional or not, my parents loved each other deeply. And I guess she couldn't bring herself to throw away that memory. I too want to build a family that loves each other like my parents did. I hope to wear this wedding dress at my own wedding someday, ideally with James. 2 years later, James and I began the steps to become a real family. That wedding dress is still carefully preserved. These clothes are just more comfortable and easier to move in. I tried to respond cheerfully to the teasing from the mother-in-law and sister-in-law. It wasn't worth going into battle mode over. It was just that my clothes were more plain than theirs, no big deal. Still, I was shocked, as I had thought hard about what to wear to meet James's wealthy family. Far removed from the life of ordinary folks. Is this what commoners wear, I wonder? Maybe it is. Why don't you touch it for the memories? It's so rough and funny. They laughed again, mocking my attire. It was tough standing up to the two of them alone since James was delayed by sudden work. The conversation eventually turned to why James and I were getting married. Can you believe it's so clear just by looking at her? She's completely out of our league. Is she marrying for inheritance? Since she has no parents, is she after our wealth? How brazen. Commoners' thoughts are so barbaric. Barbaric? I wasn't after any inheritance. And I couldn't understand why I was being accused of such things. The one-sided barrage continued, and I grew tired. When I'm tired, my thoughts start to spiral into negativity. I thought, I guess I really am not good enough for James. Gradually, I couldn't even respond anymore and just looked down. That was when James arrived. Sorry I'm late. When I finally looked up, there was James's face, providing a much-needed sense of relief. Oh, there you are. We were just explaining to her how different in status she and James are, how troublesome it is. Right, Maggie? Why, yes. I was disappointed. Seeing my state, James loudly declared. Status doesn't matter. I just want to marry Maggie and be with her forever. Please don't make her feel down with unnecessary comments. Anyway, if the greetings are over, we should be going. We've got a wedding meeting to attend, we're busy. Despite their arrogant demeanor, the mother and sister-in-law didn't start a fight. So, James got angry. The two seemed shocked and were visibly downcast. We were wrong. Go ahead and plan the wedding as you two like. So please, don't be so angry. The mother-in-law pleaded tearfully. She had always been the obedient good girl. So being scolded by James was a shock to her. Maggie, I'm sorry too. It wasn't all serious. Since James chose you, we support you. Let's get along from now on. Suddenly, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law turned to me with smiles. I couldn't help but wonder about their earlier behavior, but peace is best. So I greeted them with, thank you in advance. We want to support you, so let us know how the wedding preparations are going. We'll do anything we can. Thank you. Oh, and about the dress. You can choose any dress you like from the shop we always use. Ah, about the dress. James cut in. We've already decided on the dress. Maggie plans to wear her mother's heirloom dress. I had told James that I wanted to wear my mother's heirloom dress. And he was delighted and fully supportive of the idea. Oh, is that so? Well, if James thinks it's good, then it's fine by me. That's wonderful, Maggie, to be able to wear your mother's dress. Could you show it to us sometime? Yes, of course. The shift in their attitude was almost frightening. Later, when I showed the dress to the mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they praised it highly. Given that these were the same two who had called my attire poor at first meeting, I was a bit nervous about what they would say. But it was okay. Then the sister-in-law suggested, "You know, we should use one of our rooms to keep this precious dress safe. We'll even include a mannequin. It's our wedding gift to you." Oh. That's too much. It's been fine just the way it's been kept up till now. What are you talking about? It's almost time to showcase it at the wedding. So it should be stored properly. Please, let us take care of it. It will be in even better condition than now, and you can use it even after the wedding. Enthusiastically offering to store the dress on a mannequin in their room. I agreed since they were so insistent. The unused room quickly became even nicer. And the mannequin donned the dress like a display. A strange but visually appealing arrangement. I was initially worried. But it seemed James's family had come to support our marriage, which was a relief. As other preparations progressed steadily, the day before the wedding arrived. The dress was to be transported to the venue the next day. When James and I went to the room to retrieve it, there was a slight smell of burning. Maybe there was a fire nearby? The smell was strong inside the house, which was concerning. We headed straight for the dress, where the burnt smell grew stronger. After exchanging a look with James, we opened the door. And there was a shocking sight. It was burning. My mother's dress, along with the mannequin, was on fire. No way. I was too stunned to move. In the meantime, James quickly grabbed a fire extinguisher and started spraying. He tried to extinguish the flames that were spreading outside the dress. It was the first time I had ever seen a fire extinguisher in action. Before I knew it, I was crying, watching my mother's dress burn and James struggling to put it out. I felt utterly helpless and couldn't stop my tears. It was an almost unreal scene. Once the fire was out, James came back to my side. The dress was completely burnt. No, why? I didn't know what to say or feel, I was just stunned. It burnt to a nice color, didn't it? I heard a voice from behind and couldn't believe my ears. It was the mother-in-law's voice. How shameful to try to appear at our family's wedding in such a tattered dress. A poor girl after inheritance. Divine retribution, that's what this is. The mother-in-law had reverted to the disdainful person I first met. Mom, how could you? I can't forgive this. I will never forgive this. I didn't do anything specifically. But, just think, we nearly had that ragged dress at the wedding. It would have been a disgrace for generations in our family. I don't know why it burned. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Thankfully, it was just here that burned. Not the house. Lucky, right? Oh, and by the way, you can cancel tomorrow's ceremony. I'll cover the cancellation fees. No, we will not cancel, I said, wiping away unstoppable tears. I'm not going to be defeated. I will definitely marry James. I thought, this is the start of becoming a wonderful couple who love each other. Just like my parents. Oh, really? Well, I'm looking forward to tomorrow then. The mother-in-law said dismissively as she walked away. I thought, Mom, I'm sorry. The only keepsake has turned into this. A feeling of guilt toward my mother overwhelmed me. James was still there by my side. I continued to cry for a long time, gradually calming down. But then, from my sorrow, anger began to emerge. We just wanted a happy marriage, nothing else. It was unbearable to be treated this way when we hadn't done anything wrong. The mother-in-law claimed ignorance, but I couldn't believe that was possible. For now, we decided to report to and consult with the venue. I was conflicted about whether to borrow a dress at this point. Having not considered any dress other than the one, I felt nothing for any others shown to me. And so, the day of the wedding arrived. Because James is the son of a famous company president, the ceremony would be filled with television and streaming cameras. Initially, I was resistant to the idea, but I resolved myself to it, knowing it meant being with James. Peeking at the preparations, the venue looked more lavish than I imagined, making it feel like it wasn't my wedding. The mother-in-law and sister-in-law were dressed even more extravagantly, mingling and laughing with the guests, making them compliment their outfits, and saying, James's bride is just a commoner, so plain and simple. Her dress must be something hastily put together from yesterday. Sorry, we'll be catching everyone's eyes instead. It was our wedding, but they acted as if they were the main characters. In a way, I wanted to tell them to expect to become the real main characters soon. But for now, I just quietly watched from the sidelines. The main ceremony was about to start. I had decided to walk down the aisle with James. I debated walking alone but wanted to start the path with James, who had been by my side since I thought I'd be alone. Hand in arm, I walked slowly down the aisle, reflecting on my life so far and savoring the reality of living forward with James. Compliments like beautiful could be heard from the guests. Usually, the entrance is watched in silence, but it was nice to hear such voices. Then, suddenly, loud laughter broke out. I can't take it anymore. What's happening? You're making me laugh, stop it. Of course, it was the mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Thought it was a crow. Right. Right. A wedding dress has to be white, right? Ah, see, the dress got burnt to a crisp yesterday. Maybe that's why she's wearing a burnt crisp dress. Ah, makes sense. A burnt crisp crow dress. Perfect for that commoner. They were gleefully chatting away. I endured. There was no point in retorting here. Let those who want to speak do so, I told myself, focusing on walking forward, ignoring them. I was amazed at how continuously they could dish out demeaning comments. Be quiet. It's disrespectful to James, Maggie, and everyone attending. Besides, don't you know about the black dress? Suddenly, the father-in-law spoke up. The two went silent, making faces of regret. The venue quieted down, and the ceremony proceeded solemnly. The black dress carried a strong message that it would not adhere to anyone else. After much distress about not being able to wear the original dress, this was the solution I chose. With this black dress, I wanted to affirm my love for James and aspire to be an even more loving couple than my parents. James agreed. After the incident, he couldn't genuinely look for a new white dress. Remembering my mother's dress, learning the meaning behind the black dress from the planner, I was drawn to it and decided on it. After the ceremony, there was a break before the reception. The guests were seated, and we entered to a warm welcome. Once again, we savored our happiness together. As we took our seats, a large screen in the venue displayed a video. Everyone probably expected a slideshow about how we met or from our childhood. But the video shown was completely different. It showed the room where my mother's heirloom had been stored, displaying the mannequin and the dress that had burned completely yesterday. A figure entered, set the dress on fire, watched as it spread, then turned and walked towards the camera before disappearing. The fire grew as the video played. Watching this, everyone in the venue turned their attention to one person. I thought, just as you wanted, sister-in-law. You've become the center of attention at this venue. I said this in my mind. What is this? Stop it. Turn it off. Voices of protest were heard, but there was no stopping it. I had control of the video switch. Just as the dress was almost fully engulfed, James and I appeared on screen, with him extinguishing the fire. The video also clearly captured the person hurling abuse at us, drawing everyone's attention once again. Don't look at me. This isn't me. It's a fake. Someone made a fake video. Yes, that's right. Just because the dress burned, they're trying to pin it on us. How shallow and foolish of commoners. Of course, our statuses are different, aren't they? Despite their ranting, I was no longer afraid. The strength of the black dress had given me strength as well. The video was from a hidden camera James had secretly installed in that room. It seemed he hadn't trusted his mother and sister. He showed it to me after we had decided on the dress yesterday, and I thought to reveal it at today's reception. I feared it might be deleted or edited to look fake, as the mother-in-law had mentioned. So I wanted to show it here where everyone could see. As expected, the individuals in question were denying it, but the video was unaltered. Something the police could confirm. Indeed, given that this was the wedding of a big company's president's son, there were off-duty police officers in attendance, and we managed to have an officer come to the venue. The sister-in-law seemed to be guilty of arson of her own property, which could lead to imprisonment from 6 months to 7 years. It's my house, I can do whatever I want with it. What's this about? I'm the victim here. She resisted vehemently, but it seems she didn't know that even if it's her property, arson is still a crime. Ultimately, it became clear she was just someone who, obsessed with money, lacked basic societal norms. And the mother-in-law spectacularly betrayed her daughter, claiming she acted alone. But the father-in-law did not entertain this and quickly disowned her. Right there in public, he announced a divorce. He had been fed up with their antics for a while, and this event was the last straw, convincing him she was beyond teaching proper values. Thus, due to this wedding, both the mother-in-law and sister-in-law were ousted from the family and became no longer related to me. Afterwards, as James began to be groomed as the next company president, I supported him while we built our form of happiness together. Despite my initial stereotype of a company president being arrogant, my father-in-law was not. He listened well to James and me, and incorporated employee feedback to grow the company. I looked forward to working together moving forward. After the sister-in-law's imprisonment, those two, perhaps thinking to retaliate, began frequently uploading videos slandering me. That commoner has stayed in our house targeting our wealth. To everyone watching this video, don't be deceived. Help us return to that house quickly, were some of the baffling messages in their videos. However, because the live video broadcast during the ceremony showed them laughing at the bride, no one paid them any attention anymore. Their videos gained no traction, only accumulating dislikes. Yet they continued uploading videos, and with each upload, their clothes appeared cheaper, and their financial difficulties became increasingly evident. They might have hoped to earn from the videos, but eventually, even that ceased. How are the former sister-in-law and her mother, both with challenging personalities and now with a criminal record, managing to live well? The answer is unclear. But one can guess that their lives, far from being as comfortable as before. In contrast, James and I, despite being busy, are truly becoming a family. Today, looking at our wedding photos, we laughed together. I wouldn't change a thing about you. I will continue to live with James, committed to this in my wedding dress. I feel like my parents are watching over us from heaven with smiles. I never thought my parents, who doted on my genius younger sister, would tell me I was not needed. One child is enough, we don't need a failure like you. With those words, my parents cast me out while I was still a child. The one who offered me a helping hand in my confusion was my uncle. Sorry for being poor, but let's live together. I took that hand without hesitation. My name is Amy. I am now 30 years old, but I have a complicated past. It's about family circumstances, but first, I want you to hear my story. I was born into a typical family, with a businessman father and a stay-at-home mother. I lived with my grandparents at my father's ancestral home, and my unmarried uncle also lived with us. I started living there when I was 4, and my uncle was 24 at the time. Living with your parents at that age isn't rare. But my uncle had a reason he couldn't leave home. As a child, I didn't know the details, but it seems he was frail from a young age. Even as an adult, he was often ill and couldn't keep a job. Eventually, he became a part-timer, but he could only work a few hours a day, a couple of days a week. It probably wasn't enough income to live on his own. Maybe because he felt a sense of inferiority for still being dependent on his parents. My uncle always looked apologetic. "Damn, what a burden you are." My father would often yell at him, always when the grandparents were not around. My grandparents loved both their healthy son and frail son equally. Due to the recession and reduced income, my father, who relied on his parents, probably wanted to restrain himself in front of them. However, when the grandparents weren't around, he always said terrible things to my uncle and laughed at him with disdain. My uncle, though looking sad, never got angry or talked back. "Why don't you get angry?" I asked innocently as a child. With a troubled look, my uncle replied, "Because it's true that I rely on my parents." Back then, I thought that made sense, but now as an adult, I think my father relies on them too, so he's not in a position to talk. If I had understood that back then, I would have sided with my uncle. As a child who didn't understand, I felt bad when my father yelled at my uncle but couldn't say anything. Even though the atmosphere was tense when the grandparents weren't around, it was peaceful when they were. In front of the grandparents, my uncle would relax and smile, and my father wouldn't show his true feelings. My mother was too busy taking care of me and my 2-year younger sister, Heather, to bother about the relationship between my father and uncle. I thought life would always continue like this. However, everything suddenly changed. My grandparents died in an accident when I was 6 years old. It was very sad and lonely, and I cried a lot. Heather and I cried loudly together. I remember my uncle quietly shedding tears. But what I remember most, what I can't forget, was my father's laughter. Yes, he was laughing. His own parents had died. But he didn't cry once when he rushed to the hospital or during the funeral preparations. It wasn't about being stoically brave. Even as a child, I understood that my father wasn't sad. And that turned into a certainty. On the day of the funeral, my father was laughing. He probably thought no one was watching, but I happened to see him. And I clearly saw that expression. It wasn't a smile that comes from sorrow or confusion. As his daughter, I knew it was a smile from genuine happiness. My father was happy about the death of his parents. Probably thinking about the various inheritances. That smile was so ugly that it scared me, and I cried. They must have thought I was crying because the grandparents had died. My uncle gently patted my head and stroked it. Looking up, I saw his tear-stained red eyes, yet they were incredibly kind. What was this? My father and uncle, actual brothers, had such opposite reactions to their parents' death. It was a moment when I felt a great disconnect with my father. After that, my father's attitude drastically changed. First, his treatment of my uncle became overtly worse. Why do I have to care for a useless person like you? Be grateful I even let you live here. If you can't pay rent or anything, I'll take all the inheritance. At the time, I didn't understand, but it was completely unreasonable. The inheritance rights should have been equal between siblings. But my father monopolized it. My uncle could have stood firm or sought legal recourse. But he didn't. Even though he looked sad, no matter what my father said. He didn't argue back or claim his inheritance. Worried about my uncle, who looked increasingly unwell, I asked, "Are you okay?" He weakly smiled and said, "I can't really work properly because of my poor health. It can't be helped." Despite being verbally abused by my father every day, my frail uncle grew thinner and his complexion worsened. Yet, he still smiled at me and said, "I'm okay." However, 3 months after the grandparents' death, my uncle was eventually kicked out of the house. "Get out, you parasite," he was told. And my uncle left without arguing or resisting. "Uncle, I don't want you to go." I was sad about parting from my kind uncle and pulled his arm. But he gently removed my hand and stroked my head. "It's okay. Amy, you're a strong girl. You'll be fine even without me." "Uncle, you're not okay, are you?" My uncle, who couldn't work properly due to his poor health. How was he going to survive alone? I looked at him with tears in my eyes, and he said, "I'll be okay," and left. The farewell to my uncle was sad. But as a child, there was nothing I could do. Moreover, I soon became unable to worry about others. 2 years after the grandparents' death, when I was 8 years old, I was attending elementary school normally. And Heather was 6. About to start elementary school. In kindergarten, they said Heather is smart, my mother started. Maybe she's a genius like me, my father got excited. And impulsively had her take an intelligence test. The result was astonishing. IQ 150. Definitely my genes. Heather scored an incredible IQ of 150. I didn't quite understand. But I knew somehow my sister was amazing. "Heather, you're amazing." "Thank you, big sister." I praised my sister without fully understanding, and she happily smiled. Those were good times. Until then, they were good. After that, it was the worst. All right, let's get her into a competitive school, my father declared, driven by his mysterious confidence. She's a genius, so it'll be fine, he said, and my mother became motivated. After that, Heather started attending cram school every day. Naturally, my mother was the one accompanying her, which meant she neglected our home. Then my father started. Hey, since Mom and Heather are busy, you take care of the house, he said to me. From then on, laundry and cleaning became my responsibility. After school ended, I couldn't play with friends. I had to go straight home and do chores, or I'd be scolded by my parents. If I didn't do them properly, I'd be skipped dinner. We don't have time to care for a failure like you, they said. Why can't you score perfectly? Seeing a score in the 90s on my test, my father yelled at me. Seriously, learn something from your sister for once, my mother said with exasperation. No matter how well I did on tests or how many races I won at the sports festival, my parents never looked at me, never praised me, they just ignored me. Like a machine, they only ever said, learn from your sister Heather. And then they added, well, it's probably impossible for you anyway. Heather is a genius, but you are incompetent. Heather really was a genius. She learned rapidly with just a short time at cram school, and passed the entrance exams in no time. As a result, my parents became even colder to me. They spent money on Heather. I couldn't even get new clothes and struggled with the ones I had outgrown. Heather got to eat delicious food. I got leftovers. Heather went on trips. I stayed home alone. My parents blatantly doted only on Heather. This child will surely be someone great in the future. Then our retirement will be secure, my father would say with a laugh. A doctor would be good, wouldn't it? Or maybe a lawyer. Even aiming for a politician is not bad. With a genius daughter like Heather, we're super lucky. I was invisible in my parents' eyes. My existence, crying in Heather's shadow, was forgotten. And when I was 10 years old, my parents finally said it. We need money for Heather's gifted education, so we don't need you. Huh? Confused by what that meant, my father said. We're saying one child, Heather, is enough. No way. How am I supposed to, by myself? Well, I'll give you your brother's contact. Here's some pocket money. Figure it out on your own. They really gave me just a small amount of money, and I was truly kicked out. I cried and pleaded at the front door to let me in, but there was no response. The door did not open. Desperate, I headed straight to the station. At 10 years old, I had enough knowledge to manage, even to ride a train. Asking people for directions, I somehow made it to my uncle's apartment. The bell rang, and my uncle came out with the same kind face as I remembered. He was shocked to see me and let me in. When I explained the situation, he was furious. What are my brother and his wife thinking? I felt sorry and depressed even though I wasn't the one being scolded. Wondering if I was just a burden, tears slowly formed in my eyes. Then, a hand gently placed on my bowed head. Just like in my memories, it was a large, warm, kind hand. It's been tough, hasn't it? You're safe now. But what should I do now? As you can see, I still often get sick and don't make much money, I'm poor, my uncle said with a wry smile. But he looked much stronger than when we lived together before. Maybe being away from my father brought some change in his heart. He looked me straight in the eye and smiled. Sorry I'm poor, but but Amy, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to become your parent. Huh? I mean, in this case, maybe more like a foster father? I might not be very reliable, but... Before he could finish, I jumped into his broad chest. Unlike my father, my uncle's chest felt very safe. It's all okay now. Relieved, I sobbed uncontrollably, and my uncle gently stroked my back. It felt just like a real parent who genuinely loved me. Since then, I grew up under my uncle's care. Indeed, we were poor and he was often sick, which was tough. But even in poverty, our home had smiles. I had almost forgotten how to smile while living with my parents. But living with my uncle, I began to smile a lot. A poor yet happy family, exactly that. My uncle gave me a lot of love. I worked hard in everything to repay my uncle's kindness. He praised me when I tried hard. Even if the results were bad, he praised the effort. I was so happy I tried even harder. The existence of my parents, who never praised me, eventually faded from my memory. I grew up healthy with my uncle, and 20 years passed in a flash. I turned 30. And now, familiar faces stood before me. Mom, Dad. It's been a while, Amy. You been living well? Smiling was my father, pushed to the back of my distant memories. He had aged considerably, with hardly any hair left. My gaze towards him was cold. Naturally, it was a what now situation. Unperturbed by my icy gaze, my father said, "Well, let's put the past behind us and get along as a family from now on." My response was, "Of course, what? What are you talking about? Get along as a family? Don't joke with me. Figures, a failure like you would speak like that. Can't help it. I'll re-educate you from now. No thank you. Please leave." As my father tried to enter the apartment and I pushed him back, my mother joined in. "Amy, don't be stubborn, rely on us. Living in such a shabby apartment, you mustn't have had a good life. It's none of your business, please leave. Don't be strong-willed. Just let us in." "No, go away. Let us in. Go away. They're ridiculous, both in their mid-50s. Supposedly weakened, but still forcefully energetic. No, wait, if it's 2 against 1, of course I'd be pushed back." While thinking nonchalantly, "Don't cry if you're being pushed." My father managed to get a foot in the door. So I pushed back with all my might like a sumo wrestler. No. Eek. They fell on their butts from the momentum. I naturally looked down on them. "Ah, you're so annoying." "What? I'm busy, so can you please leave? What's with that attitude? What do you think of us, your parents? The moment you abandoned me, I stopped thinking of you as my parents. But we raised you until you were 10. Until I was 10, huh? I feel like the only time I was properly raised was when my grandparents were still alive. But you managed to survive, didn't you? At that level, you don't have the right to act all high and mighty." As my parents stood up, rubbing their backs, they seemed much smaller. They were only in their 50s, yet they looked old enough to be in their 70s. "You were the ones who said one child, Heather, was enough. Since I have a genius sister, there's no need for you to come see me, right? That's not going to work anymore." My father grimaced bitterly at my words. Did something happen to Heather? Did she become a shut-in? She became a lawyer. Well, good for her. Amazing, isn't it? Just like someone with an IQ of 150. And then she disappeared. Amazing indeed. As I pressed for details, it turned out Heather had entered law school as expected, went through graduate school, and took the bar exam. She didn't pass on her first try, but did eventually. It's unclear. But after some training and whatnot, she officially became a lawyer. And yet, she disappeared? She said, "I won't take care of you guys," and left. Well. So, she abandoned you. Congratulations. That's not a happy occasion at all. That ingrate, returning all the care we've given her with betrayal. Well, there wasn't any love, was there? My parents thought they were doting on my sister. But it probably just felt suffocating for her. Parents who changed completely just over an IQ number. Parents who imposed excessive expectations. Parents who only pressed their own desires under the guise of affection. No wonder my sister had enough. Dad, the company went bankrupt. Tough economy, huh? There's virtually no severance pay. And the unemployment benefits are about to run out. Good for you. Not good at all. But looking for a new job at another company is too tough now. Too tough, huh? I can't help but laugh at their lack of enthusiasm. So, you should take care of us. My laughter instantly stopped. No, thank you. What? Are you saying you'll abandon your parents? The only parent I have is my uncle, who has been raising me since I was 10. Huh? My father looked stunned by my words. You came to this apartment, so you knew I was living with my uncle, right? What's there to be surprised about now? You think of him as your parent? The uncle who gave me all his love is my father. My parents, surprised by my implication that you never gave me any love. So you're not my parents, stared at me. Despite his frail health, my uncle worked hard. He tried his best so I wouldn't have to struggle. And I've worked really hard to repay his kindness. So, you have a decent job then? Pretty decent. I shrugged, and my father suddenly grabbed my shoulder. Let go. So, you're angry, and you're embarrassed. Listen to what I'm saying. No need to hear it all to understand. You were lonely, and you're sulking. That's right. You were always less loved than your sister, so you sulk. But you're happy and embarrassed to meet us, your parents. So, you're at Sundara. Don't just make things up. Don't worry, from now on, I'll be with you as a parent. I don't understand what he means. Is my father already suffering from dementia? I stared blankly at my parents' foolish faces, slowly beginning to laugh. What are you laughing at? Are you happy? No way. Just so you know, I haven't thought about you at all these past 10 years. Thanks to my uncle, I've been living a very fulfilling life. Surprised by my sudden laughter, I continued speaking. You know, I went to university on a scholarship. Oh, so you got a good job then? Yes. I got a job at a pretty famous large company. That's great. And I got married by chance. Oh. Then we must greet your husband too. No need. Yes, we must. It's impossible. He's overseas right now. Oh, what? And by the way, my uncle is also overseas. Huh? My brother too? How can that be? I thought you were living here alone. So I figured that frail guy must be. Don't just assume my uncle is dead. He got an overseas assignment. And it's a great place for rest, so he went with me. My uncle has gotten much healthier and is happily playing with my kids. Well, you have grandchildren too. Bombarded with all this sudden information. My parents looked like their heads were about to explode, their eyes darting around in confusion. I just smiled at them sweetly. At first, my uncle was reluctant about living together. But he finally agreed. We're all living happily as a family now. Then, we could also go overseas. You can, but we won't live together or take care of you. Live on your own money. That's impossible. Are you abandoning your parents? You abandoned me first. Frustrated by their selfish claims, I finally snapped. My parents turned pale. I owe nothing to you since you abandoned me. But I owe a great deal to my uncle. I plan to repay his kindness. At least send us some money. My uncle never touched the money I sent. And he continued to live in this shabby apartment. But he finally agreed to live together there, so I came to make arrangements. What? It's ironic that on the last day I'm leaving this rundown apartment, you show up. What a coincidence. Huh? What? You're leaving? The paperwork is done, and I'm just returning the keys. I'm heading back to my home overseas immediately. What about us? Are you abandoning your own mother? As my mother turned as pale as my father, I nodded emphatically. Thank you for abandoning me, I said with a smile, leaving them speechless. Really, thank you. Because of that, I'm happy now. With those words, I walked past them. How does it feel, the parents who abandoned their daughter? To be abandoned by both daughters? I asked one last question, but no answer came back. I didn't wait for one. And left, knowing this was the real farewell to my so-called parents. Afterward, I returned to my own home overseas. The efforts I put into living alone with my uncle paid off. And I managed to land a job at a good company. Then, I got an overseas assignment and married a man I met there. My uncle cried and blessed us. Now, children have been born. And I've invited my uncle to live with us. I'm happily living with my husband, children, and uncle. And I wish I could find a wonderful man like my sister's husband soon. My sister said, laughing as she watched the children play in the garden beside me. Well, you've finally been freed from our parents' curse. I'm sure you'll find someone great. I need to get used to the work here first. Why don't you get a lawyer's qualification here? I'd rather not be a lawyer. I'm done following our parents' orders. I want to work hard at a job I love. That makes sense. Right after I was abandoned and left home, my sister sent a letter to my uncle. It was about how she couldn't stand our parents' distorted love and pressure. My uncle and I decided to rescue her on her way back from school without letting our parents know. My sister wanted to come live with us too. But my uncle's financial situation couldn't support both siblings. Most importantly, our parents wouldn't allow it. So, she stayed at home until she could leave as soon as she was an adult. It was tough, but my sister overcame the challenges and gained her freedom. Seizing the opportunity when our parents were happy, she became a lawyer. My sister left home. Of course, I helped her with that. She's struggling with the language and adapting to new things here. But she'll be okay. After all, she endured living with our parents. I know no one more patient or hardworking than her. She'll adapt here soon. I'm more worried about my uncle. Uncle, you're going to language school? I said. And my sister nodded with a smile. That's right. It's never too late for anything. His health has improved a lot, and he needs to enjoy life now. Yes, he does. My parents, who had taken all the inheritance for themselves and squandered it. Ran out of money quickly. Despite trying desperately to invest in their daughters, they faced unemployment. They sold the house. But since they had taken out loans against it, they ended up with little. They've been begging relatives for money, but everyone has treated them coldly, forcing them into poverty. Relatives have shared with me, chuckling, that my parents are constantly fighting. It's unthinkable to look down on siblings or discriminate among them. Yes, it is. My sister nodded again at my words. No matter what, I will protect you, Heather. I've already received enough protection. Thank you, big sister. When I felt a touch teary from my grown-up sister's words. What protection? A hand was placed gently on my head. Though he seemed smaller and more wrinkled, it was as warm as ever. I turned around, smiling. Thank you. Huh? Seeing my uncle's puzzled face, I laughed and said, Thank you, Dad. I love you. The inheritance of $10 million from our parents will be all mine. It's obvious that our parents, who care more about me than someone as unattractive as you, would want me to inherit everything. My sister didn't help at all with our parents' funeral after their sudden deaths. Yet, as soon as it ended, she started discussing the inheritance. What she insisted was hardly acceptable, though. Fine by me. You can have the entire inheritance, but just don't ever contact me again. Who would want to? You don't seem to realize that you're the one being cut off, not me. I turned my back on my sister as she laughed mockingly. I had lost my sister following the loss of our parents, but I felt no sadness. I am Hillary. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. Both parents started their own companies and were entrepreneurs launching new ventures. Thanks to them, both my sister Megan and I graduated from private high schools and universities. After university, I joined the company where I work now. But Megan never looked for a job after graduating. She just roamed around, occasionally working as a part-timer or a temp worker, without any real consideration for her future. Her actions were always impulsive. Still, our parents indulged her, always providing money for her escapades and living expenses when she wasn't working. They told me to plan my life carefully and manage my finances. Yet they never held Megan to these standards. The reason was simple. Megan had a very pretty face. She inherited our mother's large eyes and double eyelids, our father's sharp nose and beautiful eyebrows, and even our grandmother's good figure, making her a beauty that turned heads everywhere she went. Loved by everyone and confident, Megan was always popular and charming wherever she went. In contrast, I was born with our mother's low nose, our father's small eyes and single eyelids, and our grandfather's less flattering physique. I was shy and slow to warm up to relatives. Until Megan was born 6 years later, inheriting all the best features from our parents and grandparents. I had been the beloved first grandchild. But once she arrived, everyone doted on her. I loved Megan dearly too. She would follow me around, calling me Hillary. And I took great care of her. By the time she was in elementary school, she was so cute that she received offers to become a child model or entertainer from various magazines. This adoration, however, became painful for me as I entered middle school. Scouts who came to sign Megan would want to see me, but they lost interest in me instantly. and her friends openly stated how different we looked. Gradually, I began to feel the pain of hearing from others that Megan is cute. But her sister is. Even when I put effort into makeup and dressing well, Megan, laughing in her school tracksuit, was seen as cuter. Despite managing my diet, Megan, who would eat lots of sweet bread at night, maintained a better figure. No matter how hard I tried, I was always seen merely as Megan's foil. Worse still, as Megan grew up, she became aware of her blessed looks and started to openly ridicule me, feeling superior. In high school, her harassment began in earnest. It was routine for her to hide and take my things, or even claim the clothes I had saved up my allowance to buy. At times, she would even stage dramas in my room with her clothes, crying to our parents that I had taken them. Despite my protests of innocence, with a charming Megan at the center of our home and me locked away studying, it was clear whom our parents would believe. Hillary, you're the older sister. Don't be mean to Megan. Megan is just messing with you because she likes you. You're her sister, so please forgive a little mischief. No matter what I did, I was painted the villain, and if I locked my door for protection, I was scolded for not trusting family. Fed up with such a life, I started living alone as soon as I graduated from university, staying away from home. Despite my parents' pleas to come home, I never wanted to return to that house. I deliberately took temporary jobs during the holiday season just to avoid going back. About 3 years into this life, our parents were suddenly killed in a traffic accident. Megan and I met for the first time in a long while. Throughout the funeral, Megan was constantly in tears, so I handled the necessary arrangements, crying myself too. But a huge problem remained: inheritance. As the only heirs, it was easy to predict what Megan would say. During a later meeting at our childhood home to discuss the inheritance, our parents' estate is worth about $10 million. I'm taking it all. After all, you're unattractive, and our parents loved me more. They would be pleased. Oh, want some money for plastic surgery? I don't want it. What? Megan was surprised by my response, but no matter how much I thought about it, I didn't desire the inheritance. There was no time to mourn our parents, overwhelmed by managing relatives, subordinates, and business partners who attended the wake and funeral, and hearing comments like, "Huh, are they sisters? They don't look alike at all." And seeing Megan's smug look made me tired of it all. I don't want the inheritance. You can have all $10 million, but there's one condition. At the mention of a condition, Megan tensed up and glared at me sharply. I won't inherit anything. In exchange, I'm severing all family ties with you right here, today. From now on, we won't contact each other or ask for help, no matter what. That's my condition. Megan looked dumbfounded at first, but realizing the terms were in her favor, she began to smirk. $10 million and I get to cut you off? That's perfect. Why would I ever contact someone as ugly as you? Just don't come crying to me later asking for money. Ignoring my sister's mocking laughter, I left our family home. I had lost all my family members but felt no sadness, only relief at being freed. 3 months later, my peace ended. Megan started bombarding me with calls. I hung up immediately, but she kept calling. Since I use my phone for work, I couldn't just turn it off, so reluctantly, I answered. Hillary, I need a favor. I don't have a sister. It's annoying to keep getting calls, so stop contacting me. As I tried to hang up, Megan ranted on without even apologizing for breaking our agreement. Afterward, I tried to spend Mom and Dad's savings. But a friend who works at the city hall asked if I had consulted about the inheritance tax. It's inheritance if I, their daughter, receive Dad's money, right? But do I have to pay taxes just for receiving Dad's money? When I told my friend I would inherit $10 million, she said I should consult a lawyer. But I don't know anything about lawyers, so I want you to handle it for me. Her absurdity gave me a headache, but it wasn't worth the trouble to argue. I decided to tell her the facts only. As for the inheritance tax, you don't have to pay in this case, since the amount is under $11.4 million. You can only inherit everything because I renounced my claim. I've already informed a lawyer that I won't inherit anything. So, I have no right to do anything about Dad's estate anymore. Wow, that's great. Yet, you should ask a lawyer for details. Just so you know, you cannot just inherit it automatically. When a person dies, his property passes to his personal representative, who then distributes the deceased person's assets after deducting the inheritance tax. If money in the bank is held in the deceased person's name only, then family members usually cannot get access until probate is granted to the personal representative. You got it? Anyway, don't contact me again. When I said that, Megan lost her words and ended the call. It seems she didn't check the facts about inheritance. If she keeps this up, she probably doesn't realize that her assumption of inheriting $10 million is fundamentally flawed. But explaining or handling it for her? No, thanks. I finally relaxed, relieved at the silence of the phone. Later, Megan did consult a lawyer. She found out during the estate investigation that the $10 million was the total value of our parents' assets, not readily inheritable cash. Moreover, most of that money was tied to the businesses they had started. And Megan, who had no involvement with the companies, was not entitled to it. Worse, she was now responsible for repaying debts due to being a cosigner on some business loans. How much of the inheritance can I actually receive? As she offset the debts against the assets, the inheritance amount dwindled. Megan, panicking, clung to the lawyer after being told she would only receive about $1 million. She kept calling me in tears. Hey, Hillary, I'm only getting $1 million. This doesn't make any sense. That's still a lot of money, like winning a lottery. Didn't I say not to contact me anymore? Despite the substantial amount, Megan, who had expected $10 million, became a nuisance with her frequent crying calls. And Megan's troubles didn't end there. Even though her inheritance was nowhere near $1 million, rumors spread that Megan inherited $10 million. She was hounded by unknown relatives and so-called friends asking for money. And even stalkers and extortionists appeared. Hillary, help me. Where are you now? I'm suffering so much. Her screams filled the voicemail on my phone. Judging by the content, Megan had probably visited my old apartment. But I had already terminated the lease and moved out. With no other way to reach me, she kept calling and leaving messages. She eventually went to the police, but since she herself had boasted about inheriting $10 million from our parents and suddenly started gifting designer bags to her friends, it was a self-inflicted situation. As expected, the rumors had spread. The police were at their wits' end, but eventually strongly advised her to move. Hillary, I've met the man of my dreams. Peter doesn't know about the inheritance and truly loves me. One day, the tone of the voicemail shifted from crying to cheery. I suspected a scam, and sure enough, the man Megan met by chance and started dating, named Peter, proposed they move in together. After learning she had substantial money in the bank, he advised against the bank's risks and suggested keeping the money in a safe at home. Megan ignored the bank's warnings and closed her account, converting most of her inheritance into cash, which she stored in the safe. The next day, the safe was empty, and Peter never returned. I was deceived. Peter was only after the money. This is the worst. My whole life is the worst. Hillary. Why aren't you answering the phone? Why won't you help me? It's because of such an attitude that you're ugly. Megan's chaotic voicemail messages kept coming in regularly. Why wouldn't she be suspicious of a man who, just after meeting and learning about her savings, immediately told her to close her bank account and turn everything into cash? Instead of calling me, she should have been more cautious about her surroundings. Hillary, where are you? Let's live together. Strangers come to my place every day. Help me. It seems Megan moved back to our old house after she could no longer afford the rent for the luxury apartment she had rented for her extravagant lifestyle. Now that she's back, self-proclaimed relatives who found out are constantly visiting her, claiming the house is too big for her to live in alone and she should live with them, which is driving her mentally exhausted. Twice a day, she leaves voicemail messages begging for my help. And finally, I made up my mind. Hello? Aren't you tired of leaving these annoying messages every day? Are you that bored? One day, I answered a call from Megan, and she seemed shocked to hear my voice. Hillary. Help me. I hate this life. I want to live with you. Where should I go? No. I made a promise with you, remember? I renounced the inheritance in exchange for you never contacting me again. How many times have you broken that promise? I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Please come and get me. I can't stand this anymore. Please help. Megan seemed not to understand my words, only repeating her pleas for help. I said no. The reason I picked up the phone is that this is the last time. I'm changing my number, so it's useless for you to call this one anymore. You're just wasting your money on call charges. Let me tell you, I'm feeling really good right now. A nasty person who always lied and put me down has cut ties and destroyed herself. I'm going to live happily, so you better do your best too. Megan's screams echoed over the phone. I thought I heard her begging for forgiveness and asking for help. But that no longer concerns me. I had renounced my inheritance as Megan wanted, and kept our promise by not contacting her. Yet, she ruined herself on her own. The thought of never having to be in contact or compared with my sister again filled me with relief. I hung up the noisy phone, turned it off, and headed to the mobile shop in high spirits. Since then, I've been commuting to work from my new home, improving my skills, and rapidly advancing in my career. My boss commented, "You used to get down comparing yourself with others, but that's gone now." My colleagues noted at lunch, "You used to say things like I'm just. But you don't anymore. You seem brighter and more approachable." Finally, I've come to appreciate myself without comparing myself to others. Although I no longer have any family, I am living a content and happy life. My sister is beautiful and talented, while I am completely ordinary. We were never treated equally by our parents. Escaping from parents who offered no love seemed only natural. Yet, 10 years later, those same parents reappeared before me. Disheveled, screaming, "Why didn't you tell us? My name is Kristen. I'm a 16-year-old high school student from an ordinary family. My father is an office worker and my mother a homemaker. It seems like a case of a hawk being born from a buzzard because Abby, my younger sister by 2 years, is stunningly beautiful. Likely a throwback to a very beautiful ancestor on our mother's side. Her beauty is my parents' pride. Moreover, Abby is very intelligent. At 14, she's already settled from being called a prodigy at a younger age. Yet her academic performance remains outstanding, always topping her middle school classes. This, of course, only elevates our parents' pride. However, recently their favoritism toward Abby has intensified. It started to show when she began middle school, but now it's worse than ever. While it's fine for parents to dote on their daughter, the disparity between how they treat me, another daughter, is too great. Abby is so adorable that we bought her branded clothes, my mother would say cheerfully. But when she turns to look at me, her smile vanishes instantly. Do you want new clothes because you've grown taller? Don't joke around, we're not a wealthy family. If it's just a bit of growth, you can adjust the hem and wear it. I absolutely won't buy clothes for you. Fix them yourself, she would say. When my clothes finally wear out beyond repair, I might get new ones, but only from a thrift store focusing on cheapness. The difference in how we are treated doesn't stop there. My parents take Abby out with them, while I'm left to house sit. The same goes for vacations. I'm always told, you stay home and do the chores. Even Abby tries to include me by saying, what about sister? But my mother just smiles and tells her, no. Kristen needs to study because she doesn't perform as well in school. My father also said, that's right. Abby isn't just beautiful, she's also kind. To worry about her failed sister like that, and laughed at his misguided joke. I was allowed to attend high school, but of course, it had to be a public one. My uniform was a hand-me-down from someone my parents knew. And all my school supplies and bag were second-hand bargains. While school life is enjoyable, I can't afford to hang out with friends after school because I don't get any allowance and can't work part-time. I have house chores to do. As parents dote on Abby entering high school, they told me, we let you go to school in exchange for doing the chores. That means I handle all the housework. My homemaker mother does nothing while I shop with limited money, clean, and cook after school. She just watches TV and laughs, telling me to be quiet if I try to speak to her. After dinner, I'm ordered to stay in my room as if they wish to be a happy family of 3, excluding me. What kind of happy family is this? Am I not a part of the family? Mostly ignored and barely spoken to, I'm treated more like a maid. It seems there's no place for me in this house anymore. Perhaps there's no point in staying. It would have been better if I could have claimed abuse. But while there's no physical violence, I'm provided with the basics of food, clothing, and shelter, so how much understanding could I expect? Talking about it would likely only make things worse. So, must I just endure? There's a term junior caregiver. But how many kids are forced to care for perfectly healthy and able parents? As I wash dishes in cold water in the middle of winter, being told not to use hot water, tears well up in my eyes. Yet, as a child, I still hope for my parents' affection. After finishing the housework and returning to my room, I study late into the night, pushing myself to do better. Unlike Abby, who grasps things quickly, I need more time to understand. Thus, I spend all my available time studying, hoping that good grades would make my parents happy, and they would finally see me, not just Abby. But such hopes shattered with the first test of my sophomore year. I did it, holding the paper with my rank on the first term exams of my sophomore year. I trembled. I'm first. Our high school isn't low level, quite the contrary. Many graduates go on to top universities. Being first in such a school is a significant achievement. This will make Dad and Mom recognize me. Overjoyed, I showed my mother the results when I got home. Mom, look. I got first place in the exams. But what? It doesn't matter, go clean and do the laundry. What? It doesn't matter. Those words dashed my elated spirits as if doused with cold water. But Mom, you always said, get first place then you can be like Abby. You'll be treated like her. She interrupted before I could finish. I don't care about that. Do you think you and your ugly self are the same as cute Abby? What? It doesn't matter what your grades are, in the face of Abby's beauty, they're irrelevant. First, there's beauty, and because Abby has good grades on top of that. She's our perfect daughter. But I'm also your daughter. Tears welled up in my eyes, but my mother wouldn't look at them, wouldn't even try. No matter how hard you try, you'll never measure up to Abby. Be thankful you can attend school, live in a house, and have food to eat. Now go do the chores without slacking off. At that moment, it felt as though the ground beneath me crumbled. What? Why do I have to be treated like this? If I'm ugly, then it's because of you too. That night, when my father came home, it got even worse. What? First place? So what? He said, tearing up the paper with my grades. Oh, how ugly, the futile struggle of an ugly daughter. You know, we don't even want to spend a penny on you. You should be thankful we're even doing that much. Doing the house chores is your role. It's terrible, Dad. What's so terrible? My despair deepened as my father added insult to injury. What value do you even have? If you want us to acknowledge you as a daughter, then start making money now. If not, at least do the household chores properly. And once you graduate from high school, get a job and hand over your entire salary to us. What? Stunned and wide-eyed, I couldn't comprehend what was being said to me. But my father just grinned slyly. I'm telling you to support us properly. Make sure you take care of us until the very end, okay? Maybe, just before I pass away, I might acknowledge you as a daughter. Saying this, my father headed towards the bath. And I could hear my mother laughing behind him. At that moment, I understood everything. It was hopeless. These parents. They were beyond saving. There was no value in staying with them. Understood. I said simply, then secretly slipped out. And made a call from a public phone to my maternal grandparents. After that, I went back to my room, packed my bags, and prepared to leave. Thanks for, well, actually, you never did help. Goodbye. I had only really received care when I was a baby. As I grew up, my parents never saw me, never treated me as their daughter. In the end, I was just a maid to them. What reason was there to stay attached to this house? My grandparents must have had an idea. Without asking for details, they immediately told me to come over. I thought about speaking to Abby before I left, but decided against it. She wasn't aware of everything that was happening. And she would be shocked once I was gone. But it would be sad for her if she got into trouble with our parents because of me. It was better for her to continue being adored as she had been. At least I wanted her to live happily. So, I left the house without saying a word. Laughter from the TV and our parents filled the living room as I left. I left home and walked away without looking back. No one was there to see me off. The grandparents I hadn't seen in years were surprised, but welcomed me with smiles. Apparently, there had been some falling out with my mother, leading almost to estrangement, which is why we never visited my grandparents' house. When I explained my situation, they were shocked and even offered to call my parents to talk it over. But I refused. There was no room for discussion anymore. There could be no reconciliation with that house. I couldn't forgive them anymore. Understanding my resolve, my grandparents welcomed me in. The days that followed were full of surprises for me. "You don't need to do the housework, I'm still young enough to handle it," my grandmother would say, taking over the chores. I only helped occasionally. A student's duty is to study, but enjoying your youth is also important, my grandfather would say as he gave me some allowance, which allowed me to hang out with friends after school or during holidays. I came home to a warm bath and delicious dinner. Normal days, normal yet not so normal days. Ordinary, yet filled with happiness. Above all, my grandparents saw me. They would pat my head and praise me. "Kristen is also our very cute granddaughter," they would say with a smile. Their love was what made me happiest and motivated me. Previously, I had worked hard hoping to be acknowledged by my parents and to prove something to them, but now it was different. I was working hard for my grandparents, for the people I wanted to repay. This effort bore fruit, and I went on to college, and then landed a job in a fairly large company, leading a smooth-sailing life. Before I knew it, I was 26, 10 years since I had left my parents' house. Living independently from my grandmother's house, I was busy with work. The days at my parents' house felt like a distant past, almost fading from memory. But then something happened that reminded me of those times. One day, I received a call from my grandmother that shocked me. "Huh, Mom and Dad are there?" Apparently, my parents had suddenly shown up at my grandparents' house. Despite not worrying about me or contacting me in the 10 years since I left. "They're demanding that Kristen come out, what should we do?" "Understood, I'll be right there." I didn't know what they intended by showing up now. But I didn't want them to trouble my grandparents. I asked my boss for permission to leave early and hurried to my grandparents' house. "I'm home." As I entered the house and saw the figures sprawled on the living room sofa, I couldn't help but yell, "What are you doing here?" I wanted to remain calm, but I couldn't help but feel my blood boil. Yet, as I was about to lose my cool, my mother stood up and confronted me screaming, "Kristen, why didn't you tell us?" That shockingly shifted me back to calmness. Because my parents had changed too much. Mom, what happened to you?" In just 10 years, my mother, who should have been in her early 50s, had hair completely white and was heavily wrinkled. My father seemed to have lost much of his hair. They looked older than my grandparents. Surprised, my father yelled, "It's your fault." My fault? How could it be my fault when we haven't seen each other for 10 years? Once, I would have shrunk under my parents' scolding and apologized immediately. They probably expected the same reaction. But instead of cowering, I glared back, and for a moment, they flinched. Ah, you're still as unappealing as ever. Thanks. I'd be nauseous if you thought I was cute. That took them by surprise. Their eyes widened in astonishment. In that funny moment of shock, my mother snapped back to reality and accused me. You're acting all high and mighty. But it's your fault our lives are ruined. Take responsibility. What are you talking about? They claim to be living in poverty now. Why? What happened to Dad's company? It went under last year because of the recession. Oh, that's unfortunate. You're in a decent company, aren't you? Support us with your salary. No, thank you. That's right, support us, huh? What did you say? Perhaps they thought I would comply as usual. When I repeated no, thank you, my father had to ask again. Oh, you. Have you forgotten the debt of being raised by us? My mother attacked, but I retorted. A debt of being raised? I was the one doing all the housework. It feels more like I raised you. With that, even my mother was left speechless. Her eyes bulging in disbelief. You're both still in your 50s, right? You can work. Work at this point. Thinking you can live comfortably after unemployment? That's naive. What? My strong words made my father flinch. What about Abby? What happened to the beautiful, talented daughter you adored? Yeah, that's right, that. What now? Do you know where Abby is? What? She ran away from us. That's when I understood everything. Huh, so your precious daughter dumped you? I sneered, and then my mother came at me again. Why didn't you tell us? Asking the same thing again. Tell you what? That Abby was only outstanding because of you. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. She told us that her being outstanding was thanks to her big sister. When she failed her exams and we blamed her, she said it was because the sister who used to help her wasn't there anymore. So, she finally told the truth. And you devils who drove her big sister away, you glare at us, huh? Then the conversation stopped, and just when she finally got a job and was about to start bringing money home, she disappeared days ago. She even quit her job, and we have no idea where she is. That's right. Abby's beauty might be thanks to our ancestors, but her academic success was a different story. Though my parents and I didn't get along, my relationship with my sister wasn't bad. In fact, it was quite good. We didn't show it much in front of our awful parents, but at night, she often came to my room. We talked about all sorts of trivial things, and I tutored her in her studies. I wasn't quick to catch on, so I had to study hard to understand things, which made me good at teaching. Thanks to me, Abby's grades were always at the top. But everything changed when I left home. Not only could I no longer tutor her, but the shock of my departure made her grades plummet. She barely made it into a decent high school. I heard she managed to get a job, but I asked about something that bothered me. What did you do with Abby's salary when she got a job? We took all of it, of course. All the money we'd poured into that girl was for that purpose. My mother replied as if it were the most natural thing. I couldn't even sigh, I was so appalled. If she couldn't make it into a top company, at least she could have gone into show business and made some money. But she totally rejected that idea. Such a waste of her beauty. Well, who would want to enter an industry knowing they'd be exploited by their parents? What did you say? My words made my mother glare at me, so I glared right back. She faltered instantly. How weak. Why was I ever afraid of someone like this? I had been brainwashed, after all. And I was just a child. But I'm not afraid anymore. Saying that, I stepped closer to my mother. Now it was my turn. How does it feel to be abandoned by your children? What are you? You knew, didn't you? That you never really loved us. Not me and not even Abby. She ran away because she knew. What are you saying? Think about it. Have you ever told your daughter you loved her? Treating her like she's just a cute toy or a pet, who would feel real love from that? I shouted with a fierce look, and my parents were speechless. Is pampering all you think love is? Oppressing the older sister and adoring the younger. Who would think such a situation is normal? Only someone as abnormal as you. Don't force your twisted views on us. We are individuals, thinking and living our own lives, not tools for your convenience. Pressed by my intensity, my mother fell over, and my father plopped down too. No money because you're unemployed? Sell the house, it'll fetch some money. That's already been seized for our debts. Serve you right. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. So now you're living in a shabby apartment? Yes, that's right. But that's about to end too, now that you'll support us. Just as my mother was about to say that I should parasite off me since Abby was no good, I was about to shout back when. Enough. My grandfather, who had been silent until then, shouted. How selfish can you be? Children are not tools for their parents. I did not raise you to be this way. He glared at my mother, who recoiled. What, Dad, you were always so harsh on me. You went down the wrong path despite that. Yes, I failed in raising you. But children can grow up without parents. I'm proud to see such a fine granddaughter grown from such a parent as you. My failure is redeemed by her. You don't even deserve to be in this house. No way. Even my father's anger left my mother without words, and she fell back. I crouched down to their pale faces. Never show up in front of me again. If you do, be prepared next time. Prepared, what do you mean? Remember what you did to me, and expect payback. What? My parents had once been such terrifying figures. But now they were completely fallen, devoid of any dignity. It's hard to believe I was ever afraid of such insignificant people. If you come again, I'll call the police, so be prepared. With my final words, my parents, pale-faced, rushed out of my grandparents' house. What happened to them afterwards, I don't know. Rumors say they got into trouble because of debts they shouldn't have taken on. But whatever that trouble was, it's probably best left unthought of. I have no intention of delving into the dark world I don't know. Nor do I have any sympathy for my parents. After hearing about their fate, I made a phone call to a certain person. Hello, big sis? Hey Abby, how's it going? Yeah. You sound good too, sis. The voice on the other end of the phone was my sister's. There was an odd pause in the conversation, given that she was overseas. How's everything there? Are you managing okay? Yeah, I've settled in completely. Thanks for helping me out, sis. What, anything for my cute little sister? Yes, my sister is now living abroad. I had known for a long time that our father's company had gone bankrupt. Because she told me. After moving in with my grandparents, I had reconnected with her. Occasionally, she came to my grandparents' house, and I helped her with her studies. Thanks to that, even though her grades had once dropped, she managed to get through college. and even landed a job. Our parents didn't know about this. When our father's company went under, I told her to escape from our parents. We were children once and couldn't have survived on our own. I couldn't ask our elderly grandparents to take care of another person. So, my sister just managed to stay out of harm's way at home until she found a job. But she had been planning her escape all along. My father's unemployment was a good opportunity, I think. She had always known that our parents' love was never genuine. Fed up with parents who only cared about their own appearances, she took my advice. She quit the job she had taken just as a stopgap and went overseas to pursue the job she truly wanted. I helped her with the arrangements without letting our parents know, and provided some financial support. Everything was done secretly, under the radar. My sister, who had been parasitized under the guise of parental doting, had finally gained her freedom. When I told her about our parents' current situation, she just said I see, without any emotional fluctuation. That's what payback for false love looks like. Thanks, big sis. Come visit me sometime. Yeah, one day. The sister who used to cry about how hard it was at home is no more. The sister who lamented the phony affection is now embracing happiness. I love you, big sis. With words of genuine, familial love, I replied with a smile, I love you too.